Hey, what's up? It's CJ here. Hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to talk about the A7IV. I just had to shoot in Atlanta with the A7IV, and it was not by choice, but here are my thoughts. Okay, so I just shot in Atlanta. It was a shoot, it's actually a reshoot from a videographer that didn't do a great job, and this company asked me to come out and shoot and reshoot, excuse me, the same thing that was shot before. Sometimes I deal with this where I have to kind of clean up after someone else. And in this scenario, the videographer may have been just a little bit just unfamiliar with shooting this type of film and this type of scenario. So this was a reshoot, and going into this, they wanted me to shoot with the A7IV because that was the same camera that was used for all the other shoots that were shot for this particular project. This is basically a series of different interviews and B-roll that was captured across over a shoot across the country and over the last year or so. So I went to one shoot before. I don't know if you saw that shoot. That was the shoot in Arizona, and then I had to go back and shoot the shoot in Atlanta, which is this shoot. And I used the A7IV for the shoot in Atlanta. I dealt with some overheating issues, but I also shot with the C80 in that same scenario. In this scenario, I was much more comfortable with the A7IV, and I was able to take it out there and get some really, really good shots. And also just be like, I don't know, sometimes after you shoot with something a couple of times, you kind of have a little bit more seat time, and you're able to kind of go to the menu settings and go to what you need to in the time of need when you're on set. When you really can't think, you just have to act, right? And so this is a great scenario for that. The shoot was very challenging though. In this particular shoot, they use indoor lighting for the plants, and I was shooting pretty much an indoor farm and hydroponics, or hydroponic farm, I believe it was. And so basically there's these really, really bright UV full spectrum lights that they use to put onto the plants and make sure that they're growing. And so that posed a challenge because, one, I couldn't bring lighting. And it's not that I couldn't bring lighting; it's just that we chose not to bring lighting for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons was that in this particular scenario, because they had already shot multiple films, my films were probably I actually shot two of the five films, and the last film in Arizona, I did not want to bring lighting as well, just because I didn't want my stuff to look drastically different than what was already created, even though it already did. So in these scenarios where you're like going out and you're kind of shooting and you're running gunning, you have to be very mindful of just your composition and using the available light to put the subject in the best scenario. Looking back at some of the shoots that were done before, that wasn't really done that well. And so even me, using the available light and placing the subject in the right place made my footage look drastically different, without artificial lighting. But artificial lighting and bringing in lighting to make sure that you have a clean look, that is something that I would have done on these shoots. I would have, if I was shooting this from the ground up, that's what I would have brought with me, is just a key light, something to knock down the sun, because there was different scenarios where you're outside and things like that. So I had to do very subtle tricks to try to at least make my footage look good, but also not look so drastically different than what was already shot. So going into the Atlanta shoot, this was the same scenario. Basically, wasn't shot with lighting, but just with available light. So there was a couple of scenarios where I had to kind of play around with it a little bit, because the area that we were shooting in, the overhead lights, or the lights that were built in, and were not nearly as bright as the lights they used to put onto the plants. So that was kind of a contrasty scenario where you got the really bright thing and then you got something that's in the dark. So for this scenario, I basically had to use some of those lights that were kind of just being used for those plants. I use those as like our key light to try to key our subject. So I try to get our subject as close to those lights as possible. And sometimes I'd actually put him in that light because the subject matter, which was the plants, was in that light. In order to get him at the same level as that, I had to place him in a good vicinity of that light, or shoot, in the light itself. And so I think that worked out well. That technique worked out well. There was some interesting hues coming off of those lights, but they weren't actually too bad. And I was actually considering using one of them for just a scenario where I might need lighting. It was a great shoot. Really enjoyed the time there. Really enjoyed the challenge as well. But the A7IV, man, I feel like it really performed incredibly well in that scenario. I shot log S-log 3. That was a mistake. S-log 3, and really enjoying what I was getting as far as image wise from that camera. Kind of prompted me to say, hey, you know what? Why don't we get the A7V? So right now we actually are shooting on the A7V, and I'll be shooting with the A7V on my next shoot. In my next video, I will talk about my last shoot, which was a couple of days ago, earlier this week. I shot a interview setup with B-roll, but the interview setup was inspired by one of my favorite Netflix series, which is Drive to Survive. I'm really inspired by the lighting setup just because they are able to capture this lighting setup in any scenario. And I'll talk about it more in that video. But that video, for that film, we actually shot with the FX3s. We had 3 FX3s and we had 1 FX6 on that shoot. And I'm really loving what we were able to do and what we were able to capture with it. So we'll talk about that in the next video. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments down below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.